First things first, I really want to start this video by apologizing for not noticing that if I actually have these on, then you could hear me better, or I could hear myself better next time I actually watch these videos. So thank you very much. I'm really hey, it only took me 62 episodes to get here. I think 63. No, episode 63 I actually used to. Anyways, I have a list to go through. So no more talking about like random stuff. Let's focus on the words that I wrote here in order to prepare for what I might be talking about. Naturally, everything I talk about is inspired by things that happen on a daily basis. And I really want to stress the fact that they are as random as they are prepared because, like, they come, something happens randomly, I take a note, that's preparation for a video to happen. And then when the video happens, I practically basically stand up, make a fool of myself, discussing that word and where it came, how it went in and out. So it's fun. Yeah. Anyway, so here's the setting. I was learning something in code and something interesting he did, and it's fairly simple. Normally, it's a way that our mind complicates things normally. So imagine I have a box and I want to basically take the stuff in the box and separate them into multiple elements. So effectively, what I can do is I can like take every item and assign it to something, or I can assign empty slots, and every slot fills in the item number that kind of comes out. Uh, Naturally, if this goes over your head, it's because I failed to explain it. It has nothing to do with you. But the idea is like instead of taking every single item, looking at it and searching what's inside, and then basically allocating this item based on what's inside, you kind of create space for them, and then when they enter the space, then you allocate what's inside them. That way, at the very least, you know you're getting them in order where you're like sorting them out, and you don't have to dig deeper unless that's what you want to do. So in code, that's basically means you're not giving the computer more work to do because the computer has to go search for inside stuff before he actually sorts them out. It's a better way for you to kind of like align them and then basically search depending on what you want to search. So it saves you basically time, energy, money, and especially if you're working online. So I wanted to walk around and think about that. And I was walking around, I saw a friend of mine or a person at work that works there. Super cool people. Like I tend to kind of like be myself around everyone. So I was like, I just want a cigarette. I'm trying to think of something out loud. And one guy randomly, I remember his name right now because I used one of those like mnemonic devices to remember it. But ultimately, he asked me, "What are you thinking about?" I was like, and I explained to him, I was like, "Oh, this guy that I'm studying is actually using a good way to kind of like organize the structure of an array." But then he goes like, "Okay, what are you doing it for?" And I go like, "I'm building my own platform." And he goes like, "Okay." Anyways, it's just like random conversation came from nowhere, and eventually I speak about something that has to do with spirituality, maybe, or maybe God, or maybe just like words and how I don't like it when the girl that is basically the mutual person between us, I think said something about I'm not liking this day, and I turned down to her and I was like, "Oh, please, next time don't say that in front of me. Just say this day. Uh, this day is taking its time to like turn out how I would like it, or something like this." And then he basically like looks at me and he starts a conversation. But anyways, we talked about mythology, and he asked me an interesting question. He goes like, "What's my favorite?" And then I try to explain him exactly how I see it. And so for me, I kind of, especially since our documented history is the past 12,000 years, even though in Hindu history there are like tablets or like stones or books that are over 40,000 years old. But for us, our documented history is about 12,000. It's from the actual ice age to how we kind of like for human beings started coming and civilization started being built. And notice like we always have kind of like space, a couple of hundred years in between always that are missing, or a couple of thousand years in between that are missing. And then we get to Homer's Iliad, 4500 BC. And then from there, it takes 2000 fucking years to reach to when the written language is discovered. Before that, there were the Greeks, they were the Egyptians. So we went from Sumerian gods, Sumerian mythology, or like, and basically that era's mythology, 9000 BC, 11,000 BC. between that era, and then went to Egyptian gods, and then after that we went to like Greek gods. And as we get closer to this day and age, our god system will go from like completely mythical beings that are like super big heads of fish and gigantic and all this stuff to Egyptians more human-like beings, but with different heads instead of like the whole body is like a completely different like element of nature. And then to Greeks that are truly just human beings living on top of some mountain because they can't come down. And eventually to this modern day, the gods that we acknowledge right now are just basically Jesus and a couple of like saints that are godly. And the one thing I wanted to explain from him was the transfer of gods within our like realm within I'm from the Middle East, right? So like everything from this side of the world, west side of the world, and then the east side of the world, because there's like India and Japan and China, they just see the world differently than we do, even though like we're the same kind of land connected thing. But anyways, so the transfer of like it's the gods kept being slowly humanized until eventually they became a human being that's worshipped as a god. And when I pointed that, I told them these are just us trying to understand better what the world kind of like is about. And I think all these god systems are literally like have been set up in order for us to explain at the time rain, thunder, soil, water, all these things to explain them. I much prefer Japanese mythology because it's very it's very much based on the spirit of everything that we can. There's the human spirit, there's the animal spirit, there's the insect spirit, but then there are trees, there's like wind, there's breeze, and for them, there's everything. There's like a spirit for the afternoon sun. And I feel it's a lot more poetic in a philosophical way. But as I was explaining it, I started laughing, and he was like, "Why?" And I go like, "Because it's funny. There's always this like in every mythology, there's always this one god. Like in Norse mythology, Loki just was bored, so he created mischief. And I think in in Egyptian mythology, one was greedy. In Greek mythology, one was what's his name? The father. Oh, come on, man. Who's the god of thunder in Greece? Zeus. Zeus was horny, and that started a war. Like each one, and I think Izanagi in Japanese mythology was rude, and that kind of like creates issues. So but I started explaining how that I believe that mythology kind of explains the psychological system that occurs in everyone's head. And these are the archetypes. And I went through Carl Jung. But the truth behind that conversation was more towards how like we individually interact with these things that are passed down throughout the ages. Why is it relevant? I have no idea. Why do we think the way we do? I completely kind of like I stopped asking why. I stopped asking why these things would actually add value to our lives if we discover them in others. More like it's more how do we discover them in ourselves? And it's the fascinating storylines and basically what attracts us to us and how we're able to elaborate of our own creativity or our own like understanding of reality through them. It was an interesting conversation that ended with black holes in space and how he believes we travel in a two-dimensional line in space. I don't see that as an actual truth, but mathematically, I have no idea. So I just like imagine we are following the sun and basically this is Earth because if we're going in two dimensions, then we'll probably be. But if the sun has its own mass in the curvature of space, we're not actually chasing it, then maybe it creates its own mass as it's being pulled, so we're rolling around it and it's going that way. Again, like it's amazing. I don't know how to like separate space yet. I haven't read enough for me to separate space in two dimensions or three dimensions. But it is always kind of like an impressive thing when you kind of realize there's a lot you can actually like touch when it comes to people. there are a lot of topics that kind of like connect to each other because you're always kind of like using some to mention others, and then basically you circle around and you realize how much stuff you need to do. But anyways, I actually wrote it down that I need to like research a bit more of the Japanese mythology in order for me to understand things. And I decided I'm going to share this in a video in order for me to hold myself accountable. So next time we discuss something or we talk about anything, make sure you mention if I ended up reading something about this and just understanding a bit more. I got a book at one point and I read it, but that was it. I don't remember shit from it. But I do watch a lot of anime, and I know that most of them are actually like that kind of stuff. We'll keep in touch, don't worry. But other than that, thank you.